things have been good for me.
Okay. How about others?
Yeah, I've been fine so far with how labs have been going.
Okay. All right. So I'm assuming it's the same with everyone, but if anyone has a problem, you guys can approach any one of us, any one of the TAs or professors. We are more than happy to help. So with lab 3, what we'll do today is I'll go over different kinds of always blocks and what happens in an always block, and then we'll go on to understand what a comparator is, what you're trying to build, and after that we'll see how different versions of comparators are manifested uh, after your code is compiled, after your Verilog is compiled. I mean, what is the actual hardware that is getting generated, and what are the mistakes that you can run into, and what are some things you should be avoiding, right? So uh, does anyone have any idea about what always blocks are, or what they do, or things like that?
They're kind of like a way to not have to use continuous assign statements for a lot of variables.
Yeah, that is true. But the actual purpose of always block is kind of twofold, right? So if you have a design, say for example, if you have a circuit with certain inputs, right? Say for example A and B, and your output is F, right? So if you want to design a circuit where you are asking it to perform certain actions every time a certain signal on it changes. For example, only when A or B changes you want the circuit to perform, or only if A changes you want certain aspects of the circuit to perform. In those particular cases, things like always blocks would actually be really useful, right? So what happens is, if you write, so the general syntax of an always block would be something like this: always at, you'll have a parentheses and then a begin and an end, right? So, and this generally happens inside your module that you're trying to build. And whatever lines of code that you write inside this, right? So for example, if you have these, I mean, not that you'll be writing with 1, 2, 3 and all, but I'm just writing them as a index for the lines inside them, right? So whatever you write inside them happens sequentially, right? Irrespective of where you have with the hardware placed inside your module or things like that. Everything in an always block happens sequentially. So for step 3 to happen, step 0, 1, and 2 should have happened, unless there are specific conditions for it, right? So that is one primary feature of an always block, where everything inside that block happens sequentially. I mean, it happens one after the other. Uh, After that, what happens is there is this parentheses that we are looking at, and this parentheses is called a sensitivity list, right? So it is called a sensitivity list because whatever you write in here, right, whatever signals you write, or whatever commands you write inside there, they are the points, they are the trigger points at which all of the things inside this always block get executed. Say for example, if I write always at A, and I give some lines of code inside this, some lines of Verilog, what happens is whenever the value of A changes, or whenever the level of A changes, depends on what kind of circuit you are looking at. uh, Whenever there is a change on A, all these lines get executed one after the other. All these lines get executed sequentially, and you can always have something like so instead of just having A, you can always have something like A and B, where uh, irrespective of which one changes, if it is A or B, uh, if there is a change in either of them, then the signal happens. You can have logical statements inside it. You can have edge conditions inside it. Like for example, if this is a circuit that uses a clock, right? CLK, you can have statements like this. You can have things like pause edge clock, always at pause edge clock, or always at negative edge clock. Right. So what happens is whenever there is a positive edge in the clock signal that is going in, changes take place. Whenever there is a negative edge in the signal going in, changes take place. If you want, your circuit to change every time there is a change in the level, I mean, whenever there is an edge, you can always write pause edge clock or neg edge clock or things like that, right? You can have any kind of expression in there. And everything inside that block again happens sequentially. Is this clear for everyone?
So for it being a clock, every time there's a positive edge, the always section would be run?
Yes. So a small example for that is, do you guys understand the concept of flip-flops, or is it not? You are not familiar with it yet. Do you guys understand flip-flops?
I don't think we've talked about flip-flops yet.
Okay, so you'll eventually come across some things like flip-flops, but I'm just trying to give a high-level example using them. So, for example, if you have a memory element or a flip-flop, generally, by and large, there is something called data that goes in, and then you have Q that comes out, and then there is a clock. Right. So generally it is indicated by this triangle, which means it's an edge triggered, device. So the way in which Verilog is written, or the main functional, place for that is always at pause edge clock. You have Q, I mean, you have begin and end. Q is assigned to D, right? So this is a, one kind of assign statement where your D or the data that is present on the input is always assigned to Q whenever there is a change in the trigger of the clock, or at every positive edge of the clock, right? So at all these edges, your data is getting assigned to Q. So something like this. You'll understand what this is in much detail in future, but as of now, that's where, if you're using clocks in your design, that's what happens. Is it clear? Do you guys understand what's happening
Yeah.
in general in always blocks and things? Okay. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll understand different mechanisms of always blocks or statements that we'll be using for this lab. So there are, a variety of ways in which you can use always statements, but some general ways. For example, like the one we discussed, we have always at A or B, begin and end, and whatever happens in here happens whenever there is change in A and B. Sometimes in your test benches, particularly when you have clocks, or if you want to generate a pulse or things like that, you can use things like always found whatever time value, say for example 5, and then you can always give clock is equal to clock inverse, right? Or if you don't want to keep it as clock, let's say A is equal to A inverse, right? Something like this. You can always give statements like this in your test benches. Generally, they are used in test benches. So what happens here is after every 5 time units, your say suppose this is a signal A and it is 0. After 5 time units, it changes to 1 because it is getting reversed after 5 time units and so on. So it will basically generate, if this is level 0 and level 1, for every 5 time units, it keeps on reversing perpetually, right? Is this clear for you guys, like what is happening in terms of always block and stuff like this? And the reason it is called an always block is kind of evident, right? It happens every time there is some change, right? For example, in this case, there is no sensitivity list at all. So this always blocks keeps on happening at all points in time, like right from the beginning of the simulation until the end of simulation, right? When unless you you stop the simulation, this thing won't stop. Similarly, these always blocks happen whenever there is changes in A and B, but you can always replace or always have something like always at star, which will make your circuit change or make your circuit perform for any data signal change or any signal that is present in your circuit. Whenever it changes, your whole block will start performing. Is it clear? Do you guys understand it?
Yeah.
All right. So what we'll do is we'll try to move on to what comparators are and what we are trying to build in this case, and we'll understand why you want things in a certain way and why you don't want things in a certain way and stuff like that, right? So moving on, say suppose I have a circuit where I have two inputs, A and B. In this case, let's assume that A and B, okay, instead of small letters, I will use capital letters so that they are, so that you know that they are multi-bit wide, so they can be 4 bits or 5 bits wide. And then I have three outputs. They are F1, F2, and F3. So as a part of this lab, we want to build a circuit something like this, where your F1 becomes 0, or I mean F1, F2, F3 can have different values of either 0 or 1, right? And the way these values are defined is, F1 is 1 if A is greater than B. F2 is 1 if A is less than B. In all other cases, F1 is 0. In all other cases, F2 is 0. And F3 is equal to 1 if A is equal to B. Right? So you want to design a circuit which obeys something like this. And you want to make sure that it is true for all possible numbers, all the positive numbers as well as all the negative numbers. Do you guys understand this? Do you guys understand what you're trying to build here?
Are you going off of the lab requirements, or are you just saying, hey, let's imagine this?
No, this is what your lab 3 is basically. I mean, this is what you want to build as a part of your lab 3.
Okay, the logic and the design specifications is different from what you wrote out.
I mean, this can be
never mind.
interchanged, I guess, but
Okay.
I'm sure this is the gist of it. Like F1 can be A less than B, F2 can be A greater than B, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, but in general, the logic inside whatever this box is kind of similar to this, right? Do you understand that?
Yeah.
All right. So can you guys think of any way in which we can write this in Verilog? I mean, behavioral Verilog should be fine, but can you guys think of any way in which we can write this in terms of behavioral or any Verilog for that matter? Like this is my problem statement. My problem statement says like I have two inputs A and B and three outputs F1, F2, and F3, and they should be ones or zeros depending on whether A is greater than B or A is less than B or things like that. And I want to write a Verilog construct for this particular thing. Is it possible for me to write it directly?
Yeah, you could. I mean, using like adders, or you could even say like for F1 there, depending on if it's just an unsigned integer, you could say, okay, is A bit 3 1 compared to, I mean, it would be kind of messy and long, but you could go like bit by bit and say, if A and is 1 and B isn't, then spit out a 1.
Yeah, we can do that. We can do a bit by bit comparison. But what I'm asking is, how would the even the bit by bit comparison, right? How would it look in terms of Verilog? Like, how would it be in terms of the code? Like, sure, we can always do bit by bit comparison, starting from the least significant bit all the way to the most significant bit, and see wherever there is a change, that's the higher value or that's the lower value or things like that. But how would you write that comparison in Verilog?
So we could use an always block and add A and B to the sensitivity list, and then you just do a set of 3 if else. And for the first one, you'd say if A is greater than B, then F1 equals 0, or F1 equals 1, F2 equals 0, F3 equals 0, and then the same for the rest of the conditions with an else statement at the end.
So something like this, right? Else, you would say, for
Else if
example,
A is less than B.
sure, else if A is less than B, then whatever F2 is 1, and F1 and F0 are 0. Sorry, F1 and F3 are 0, and so on, right?
Mhm.
And all this is in general. I mean, I would always include it in an always block so that whenever there is some change of A and B, it goes through all these if statements one after the other and try to understand, right? So, so if something like this were to be written, how do you think does it manifest it in terms of your design? Like if you write this in Quartus and compile it and go to netlist viewers and try to see what it is, what do you think you'll be finding there? Like, how would this circuit look in terms of your design? Like, would it be a decoder, or would it be like, how would it generally be?
This looks like a decoder because it's a diagonal of ones.
So what I would think is this looks like a bunch of multiplexers, because if you remember your previous labs where you had to use multiplexers, uh, it had things like selection of either of the two cases, like if A and B existed and there is a condition there, depending on that it would select something, right? So similarly in this case, if A is greater than B, that's a condition that you are trying to put, and if A is greater than B, then your output is something, right? I mean, we don't know how it is implemented until we go in and see there, but we can have a educated guess as to what things are and how things look and stuff like that. But one thing that I mean, the reason I'm talking about this most importantly is whenever there are always blocks, right? Whenever you have things like this, if you don't explicitly define what your outputs are, like for example, we know that F2 and F3 keep remain in this particular state, they are zeros. So if we just write F1 is equal to 0 in this case and then go to an else if statement, what happens is it generates latches at the end of your design. Like wherever there is F2 and F3, it generates latches which take in the value from previous stages, which is not something we want. Like for example, if the previous value of A and B are equal, then F3 would be 1. And if the next value says A is greater than B, then F1 changes to 1 and F3 remains in the previous stage. So we don't want something like that to happen. So that is the reason we have to explicitly declare F2 and F3 in each of these cases, right? Or else you'll find some weird things, like there are some implicit nets declared, there are some latches that are being formed, there are some values that are being taken from the previous stage and things like that. And to avoid those, we want to be as clear as possible, we want to be as explicit as possible, and we generally write things like this. Is it clear for everyone?
Yeah.
All right. So moving on, what we'll try to understand is you need to construct a design which will work for positive numbers. I mean, those are regular unsigned integers or unsigned numbers, and negative numbers this should include 0. It should be able to compare positive and negative numbers, and negative and negative numbers, positive and positive numbers, and things like that. So the way we are dealing with it is we have an extra signal. So instead of A and B, we have A and B going in. These are the comparing signals. And then we have a signal called C that goes in. We have F1, F2, and F3. This is our circuit. And what the C basically says is if C is high, then your signals are considered to be signed numbers. And if C is low, then the signals are considered to be unsigned numbers, right? So the way you can look at this particular thing is if both the numbers are positive, then everything is clear, right? Whichever has highest magnitude, that's the number that you want to get into, right? If both have negative sign, like for example, if C is high, then it considers both of them to be 2's complemented numbers. So if you have one in the MSB position, that is generally considered a negative number, in which case you want to write a different set of if statements, because you are basically comparing the magnitude of it. And if the magnitude is higher in negative realm, then it is a smaller number, right? You want to write something like that. And you want to also address the condition where if your signed numbers are positive and negative, then I mean, if you write things for signed numbers in general, these both conditions should be taken care of by themselves. But you just want to keep in mind that this is something you are trying to address, and this is your entire lab 3. And particularly for lab 3, you just have 1 week. So 1 week from now, you're on your next Wednesday session. I'll be checking off your lab 3 in the lab 3 session, and also starting lab 4. You need not actually program all of this onto the board. You need not have an FPGA version of this, but I want you to start off with a block diagram, understand how things are working. Though block diagram is not required for submission, it is a good practice to start with that. Start with a block diagram, get into the logic. The logic is fairly simple. It's just a bunch of if else statements, but I want you to look into it and see how it is manifested in terms of your muxes and stuff like that. And once you have that, I want an exhaustive test bench for your A and B, a self-testing exhaustive test bench if possible. And then I would just be looking at the waveforms for checkoff. That is 1 week from now. Is it clear for everyone?
Yeah.
All right. So this is more or less the concept I think that is needed for lab 3. If you have any questions, I am here till 4 o'clock today. Are you guys clear with everything so far? Do you guys have any questions?
I have a question about manipulating like the input. Like in Verilog, do you want us to do everything bitwise, or can we say like the
I mean, 2's complement, you'll have to think of a logic where it will consider things in 2's complement form.
Right.
But for regular numbers, I think if you use, even if it's a 4-bit number, if you use A greater than B, it should take care of things internally. So yeah, that would be a fun exercise to actually go in and look into, how your circuit comes out if you write code bit by bit, and if you write things as a whole and stuff like that. But
Like,
if you write it as a whole, you should be able to manage it mostly.
could I do something like what I just typed in chat? Or do you want us to like manipulate everything at a bit level?
Oh, stuff like this. So what happens is if you do an inversion of a whole number, like a whole 4-bit number, again, it's a fun experiment. So it can be a bitwise inversion. It cannot be a bitwise inversion in some cases. Like for example, there can be some special cases where if it is anything other than 0, the compiler would consider it as a high value and convert everything to 0 if you put a negation in front of it. So there are syntaxes for it, like you can use the actual word called signed when you declare things, and that would take care of stuff like this. So I would actually look into some things like that and go ahead instead of actually generating two's complement.
Okay, and that kind of goes in with Ethan's question right above mine. Like, can we
Yeah.
do that sort of thing without diving into like an adder and
Yeah, you can actually do something like Ethan wrote. In fact, I would encourage you to do something like he wrote. You need not actually go into generating hardware by yourself, like constructing an adder or something like that to actually
Okay.
perform stuff.
cool?
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. That
So,
was exactly.
so if you go through your lab manual, uh, you're explicitly asked to keep things in behavioral realm and not in structural form. So I mean, even if you had an adder, you wouldn't have, like, you would have to instantiate it. So that would be hierarchical, maybe not behavioral. Is it clear?
And we should be setting stuff up in Quartus as if we're going to put it on a board, like selecting.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, everything just like you have done so far, except for actually putting it onto the board. All right, so I'm assuming you guys are clear on this particular concept. If you have any questions, I'm here till 4 o'clock, or else you can leave me an email. And good luck.